Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for another week of A Simpler Time True Crime. The case I have for you today is a wild one, so I'm just gonna get right into it. Every couple you know has a story of how they met. Maybe they were high school sweethearts, or they met at work, or on Bumble, or in line at a coffee shop. The couple in this story today met because the woman was a nurse who was helping a man recover from throat surgery. And the patient's son was so impressed by the care this woman was giving his father, he began to fall in love with her. And the rest was history. While the wife was accompanying the husband to a work conference, she took the day to go sightseeing, planning to meet up with him that evening for the fancy cocktail event. But when she didn't show up at their agreed-upon time, he grew worried. The mystery of what happened to his wife would spiral into confusion, as strange sightings all over would leave those searching for her chasing their tails. In the end, the truth of finding her body would just make for more questions. Mainly, how did Judy get 600 miles away, and who killed her? This is A Simpler Time True Crime, the mysterious disappearance and murder of Judy Smith. Judith Eldridge was born on December 15, 1945 in Hyannis, Massachusetts. According to a 1997 article in the Philadelphia Inquirer by Michael Sokolov, Judy was raised in nearby Orleans, Massachusetts. She had a twin brother and a younger brother, and her parents owned and ran a Cape Cod diner. Judy was married 3 times total. Her first marriage was right out of high school, and it was short-lived. Her husband fled Massachusetts to go to Sweden to avoid the Vietnam draft. This next fact only reinforces to me that women should be put in charge of tracking down everybody. We need 2 pieces of information and we turn into the CIA. And sure enough, Judy tracked him down in Europe, but ultimately she left Europe alone, and that marriage ended in divorce. She then married a man named Charles Bradford. They shared a career together, exercising horses at a local thoroughbred track. Judy and Charles had 2 children together in the early 1970s. First, a daughter Amy, and 2 years later, a son Craig. But this marriage also ended in divorce while the kids were still toddlers. If you listen to enough true crime and watch enough Dateline, you've heard that there's this cliche you should never light up a room. This, of course, references how oftentimes victims of crimes are remembered as flawless individuals, and that it's a very common way to describe them. Everyone loved her, she lit up a room with her smile, etc., etc. And it's not to say that Judy didn't do that, but I actually appreciate the candidness of how her loved ones described her. And they were a little bit more real in their interviews. They said, listen, she was a tough cookie. One person close to her even described her as blunt to the point of rudeness. She could just come across that way. She wasn't trying to be. It's just definitely her affect. And she was the type of person, for example, if you were going out to dinner with, friends, they would sometimes cringe and get a little worried because if the soup was cold or the food wasn't cooked to her liking, she did not just let it fly. She was loud and she could kind of make a scene about it. She was street smart and very strong-willed. But despite the few things I was just saying before that could maybe paint her in a little bit of a questionable light, you might have seen her as kind of crass, which could be true, but the more I read about her, the more I just found her really admirable, and she just reminded me of this just a very tough woman, relatable and real. So I'll give you a couple of stories there. After her divorce, she raised her 2 kids as a single mom, and she was struggling financially and she needed government assistance at times, but she never let it get her down, and she worked multiple jobs, sometimes 70 hours a week, and she put herself through nursing school. She saved enough to buy herself a house in the Mission Hill section of Boston. Her kids have many memories of her during this time, and they remember one time she took them to visit their grandparents in Florida for Christmas. She strapped a Christmas tree to the top of her Toyota Corolla and drove from Boston to Florida in 27 hours, stopping to sleep once for 3 hours. They remember her bringing them to the movies, and she would stay outside in the car to study her for her nursing exams. When they were working their high school jobs on a tourist boat in Boston, she used to show up late in the evening with donuts for the whole crew, which, what a Boston thing, showing up with donuts. Her daughter recalled that suddenly someone would just say, "Hey, Amy, your mom's here." And she was always showing up for them in ways like that, just always present in their lives. And once her kids reached early adulthood, she took a trip with them backpacking through Europe. And not only did she travel with her kids, she solo traveled all over the world. She was a very seasoned traveler. Judy always put the well-being of her kids first, and after 2 marriages ending in divorce, she was pretty hesitant to find romance again. But after she finished her nursing degree and her kids were well into their teen years, she was working as a home care nurse for a man who had recently had throat surgery. The son of this elderly man, Jeffrey Smith, was so touched by how kind this nurse was to his father that he began to develop a friendship with her, and not too long after, they developed feelings for one another. Jeffrey was a couple of years older than Judy, but his life was very different. Jeffrey grew up wealthy, and now he had amassed wealth on his own as well. He was the son of a famous, prominent New England defense lawyer, and he spent his childhood going to private schools and leading a fairly privileged life. And he went on to graduate from Harvard Law School, class of '69. He had also been married before, and he had an adult daughter from his previous marriage. So even though the two were very happy with one another, they took things very slow. They didn't live together for 7 years, and they didn't marry until 10 years into their relationship, September of 1996. At this point, Jeffrey was working as a legal representative for the Northeast Pharmaceutical Conference, which is an organization of executives and researchers based out of New England. It was in this capacity that Jeffrey was asked to attend a conference in Philadelphia, which would take place from April 9th to April 11th, 1997. Jeffrey was an expert on healthcare law, and he was going to moderate a panel. The location of the conference was in Center City at the Doubletree Hotel. Jeffrey and Judy were going to stay the night right at the same hotel, or I should say they were going to stay right at the same hotel where the conference was at, which as someone who goes to conferences, that's my favorite way to do it. I hate nothing more than when I have to stay in one hotel and then schlep on over to another hotel for all the conference activities and back. So they were going to keep it simple and stay there and be right there, nice and convenient. The couple took a taxi to Logan International Airport on the morning of April 9th, 1997. But when they got there, they ran into their first snag of the day, and it was a big one. Judy had forgotten her driver's license. I know a lot of us are very used to post 9/11 flying, and so you're sitting there like, whoa, Judy, what were you thinking? How do you forget that? But actually, it was only in the mid-1990s that an ID was required at all. Because of this new FAA requirement, Judy was out of practice. She had only flown once in the 18 months since this had gone into effect. And so she knew she was going to have to go home, and it was going to cause her to miss her flight. She did shoot her shot just to see if they'd let her on, but she was turned away at the gate. So she told Jeffrey to go ahead without her, that she would go home, get her ID, make her way back to the airport, and catch a later flight. Because this was Boston to Philadelphia, there was quite a few flights there throughout the day, so she wasn't super worried. Now I want you to buckle up because this is one of those twisty cases, and every detail of this case is analyzed by people, including this one. And a lot of people think it's suspicious that as a very seasoned traveler, she would forget her ID. And I'm going to discuss this more later once you have a better understanding of what happened to Judy, and I'll share a little bit of my opinion and the opinion of others at that time. Because really, this case is so weird that most of what we have to go on is just people's opinions based on the limited facts we have. So Jeffrey gets on U.S. flight 762 to Boston at 3:30 p.m. Judy didn't like taking cabs because it was just sort of one of the residual effects of living in poverty all those years. She felt like spending money on a cab was extravagant when you can just take public transportation. So she did so whenever she could, and in this case, she took public transportation back to her house. She picked up her license, took public transport back to the airport, and she got on another flight and was able to make it to Philadelphia around 9 p.m. on April 9th. At 10 p.m., she arrived at the DoubleTree. Jeffrey was just getting to the hotel lobby from dinner when he saw Judy arriving. She greeted him and went to the front desk to get her key. He said in the same article with the Philadelphia Inquirer, quote, "She gave me flowers. She was embarrassed about what happened at the airport in Boston. I was intending to give flowers to her. I was grateful she had come," end quote. Which, as a side note, I just think is so sweet. So often in stressful situations like that, it's one of those times where you see someone react outside of their normal character and they're projecting stress and you might get short with one another. So the fact that they took this stressful situation and they were both just trying to figure out how to give each other's flowers through it and really showing just gratitude that she showed up, that's a real relationship green flag to me. After a long and exhausting day, the two grabbed a pizza to split and went up to the room on the 24th floor. Before they went to sleep that night, but they talked about the plans for the next day, and Jeffrey had a busy day at the conference, so Judy had decided she wanted to go out sightseeing. This was her very first trip to Philadelphia, and she wanted to see some popular attractions, like Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell. She said she planned on taking a Philadelphia Flash tourist bus. Just for reference, the Philly Flash is a visitor-friendly public transit bus that goes on a route that connects all of Philly's really big main tourist attractions. Think Penn's Landing, Liberty Bell, the Franklin Institute, the Philadelphia Zoo. You get the idea, and that's just a few of them. They planned to meet back at the hotel that evening at 6 p.m. because there was a cocktail party and the two were going to get ready together and have a nice evening. On the morning of April 10th, Jeffrey awoke before Judy. He went down to get breakfast while Judy was still sleeping. When he got back to the room, he said Judy was awake and in the shower. He remarked to her that the breakfast was exceptional and that she should get down there and try it for herself. She made a joke to him that maybe she should go down there as she was at the time, naked. So that got Jeff laughing and, they had a little conversation and off Jeffrey went to his session and off Judy went to her sightseeing. When Jeffrey returned from his last panel of the day, he returned to the room, but Judy was not there. He thought maybe they had crossed their wires and that she thought she was meeting him down at the party itself, so he got himself ready and went down. But she wasn't there. He had no way of getting in touch with her as this period of time had real limited cell phones and he didn't have one and Judy didn't have one either. He visited their room several times and he just kept going back and forth between the party and their room, which was no small feat because remember, they're up on the 24th floor. This was not like her, so at a point he actually informed the hotel concierge, who began calling area hospitals, but she was not admitted to any of them. He started to really panic because this just was not like Judy. So he left the cocktail party and he got a cab and he paid for the cab to just slowly follow the flash bus to see if he saw her getting on it or off it or around it or on any of the tourist locations. He called back to Judy's children in Boston and he asked them to pop over to the house to check the answering machine. Maybe something had happened and she called a number she knew. They were concerned as well, so they went right over and did this, but that didn't produce any information. After driving all over and calling all over and Judy still not returning to the hotel, he went in person to the Philadelphia Police Department at around midnight that night. But you know what I'm going to say next. They told Jeffrey that Judy is an adult who can choose to do as she pleases and that they can't take a report for 24 hours. Apparently, a detective told him that if he really wanted to, quote, push it, he could file his report in the morning. As it turns out, Jeffrey was attending this conference with some large figureheads in the Philadelphia community. Philadelphia Mayor Ed Randall, as well as John Purcell from the Philadelphia House of Representatives from the city of Philadelphia, both were attending this conference. Jeffrey shared his desperate situation and said he felt the police had a dismissive attitude towards his concern for his wife. This seemed to throw some weight around, and because of this, when he returned to the station that next morning to file his report, 2 detectives were waiting to take it, and they had a completely different attitude than what he had encountered the night before. He even overheard one person saying on the telephone that Commissioner Richard Neal was to receive a copy of the report. Given the visibility of this case now, and the fact that it wasn't good tourist business for Philadelphia if a tourist shows up to the city and just disappears, they put all their best men on this and they hit the streets. For a week straight, police went to homeless shelters, churches, the Broad Street subway, train, and bus stations. They went to Penn's Landing, they went to the Italian Market, and that's just a couple of the places. They checked the morgues, and they checked them again and again, and they continued to check hospitals for anybody who was admitted. The police, alongside staff at the DoubleTree, went through all the stairwells, the trash chutes, closets, maintenance areas, but there were no signs of her. Posters were put up everywhere with her picture, reading, Judith Smith, 50, white female, also known as Judith Bradford or Judith Eldridge, 5'3", 130 to 150 pounds, brown eyes, short brown hair, wearing a 3/4 length dark coat, blue jeans, sneakers, and carrying a red backpack. That red backpack is important because Judy never went anywhere without her red backpack. She even had a name for it. She called it Red Wonder, and she kept everything in it. According to the article in the Philadelphia Inquiry, she usually had in it her address book, a notebook, a current book she was reading, a can of Diet Coke, crackers, her driver's license, some of her nursing gear, credit cards, and cash. Cash that Jeffrey suspected was in the amount of about $200. After this came the sightings. One witness said they saw a person who looked like Judith Smith chasing a piece of paper, blowing around on the ground, and laughing to herself. A flash driver reported that he had picked Judy Smith up that afternoon and dropped her outside of the DoubleTree at 3 p.m. Another person claimed to have seen her in the dress department at Macy's in the Deptford Mall. This woman said that the person who she believed was Judy Smith tried to engage with her in conversation about menopause and other personal topics, and it stood out to her because it made her uncomfortable and she found it inappropriate. There are actually so many sightings of Judy, and police were able to tie a number of them to an unhoused woman who suffered from significant mental illness. And this woman looked so much like Judy that one of Judy's own children who came into town to search for her mistook this woman for their own mother at first. So that's how uncanny the look-alike was. There were quite a few sightings related to the flash bus and its route, and a hotel employee said that she had talked to Judy that late morning on April 10th, and that Judy had asked where she could catch a bus nearby. Another witness thought they saw her leaving the city's Greyhound bus terminal near Philadelphia's Chinatown, and her family said she loved Chinese food, so it would make sense that she might go to eat there, but nobody in the restaurants themselves recalled seeing her come in. We've talked about this on the podcast before, about that unreliability of people thinking they saw somebody once they've seen a missing poster, but Detective James Sweeney confirmed it further. He said, quote, "You show a picture around a lot and people will say, yeah, I think I saw that person. Even uniformed cops will do that sometimes," end quote. The police may have been eager to work on the case now, but the more their leads came up empty, it didn't take long for them to get suspicious of Jeffrey. In fact, they began grilling him and accusing him of making up the idea that Judy had been in Philadelphia at all. A female detective who forensically examined the hotel room said she found the room feeling off, like a woman hadn't really been there. She said she found hair curlers, but no signs of any makeup. She also could not find any cosmetic bag or anything like that with like anything to style your hair. And Judy's kids told the detective that their mother didn't really wear makeup or get all that dolled up. She liked the more all-natural look. She didn't wear jewelry. She kept things simple. But one thing that struck this detective as odd was that she couldn't find Judy's clothes that she would have worn the previous day. The day she went all over the place, going to the airport, then driving home, getting her ID, coming back. And I don't know about you, if you travel and you're like me, I always feel gross after a travel day. Like I need to just immediately shower. I never want to wear those clothes again. So that's me personally. But everyone is different. But she didn't have like a dirty laundry pile clothes in her hotel room, and detectives found that odd and a sign that she never really was in Philadelphia and that it was staged. But both of her children say she would have worn her clothes multiple days in a row. Her son Craig said, quote, "One pair of jeans, a sweatshirt, and a change of underwear, and you can walk the world. We're all like that in our family," end quote. But I don't want to obsess over something too granular and focus too much on her underwear here, but like that's the thing. They didn't even spot that. Aren't you going to at least freshen up in that regard and just put on a pair of new underwear? And the police looked for them. That this female detective was thinking the exact same thing. And she found pairs of unworn underwear in the drawer, but she could not find her worn underwear. Which means, according to the story Jeffrey gave, where she took her shower and everything, she would have showered and then put on the same pair of underwear that she had worn the day before. And that wasn't the only thing that was off. Judy knew people at this conference, but nobody saw her. The front desk person who was working that night, Judy checked in, told police the person who checked in under Judy's name looked like her, and she confirmed that Judy would have had to produce ID to get a room key. A conference attendee who didn't know Judy personally said she thought she saw her in the lobby that morning. And so just to be clear, this is her saying after the fact and after seeing the missing posters, like, oh yeah, I do remember seeing a person that looked like that. I think it was her. And Massachusetts State Police confirmed that Judy Smith's airline ticket from Boston to Philly at 7:30 p.m. was used. The seat next to the one she purchased was vacant, and the airline workers and other passengers didn't remember her. But the airline workers expressed that they just see so many people in a day, it's hard if they didn't stand out for any particular reason to remember them. But what they did say about their process is that at this time in 1997, what they would do is take a head count of passengers before takeoff to ensure the number on the plane of people matched the number of tickets that were brought to the gate. So unless somebody was acting as if they were her, she was on that flight. Both of Judy's children state their utmost trust in Jeffrey and do not believe he would hurt their mother in any way. And Jeffrey continued to just work hard to get attention to her case behind the scene. He made sure posters were distributed in multiple states about her disappearance. He spent time on the phone from his DoubleTree hotel room with politicians, TV, police, anything to get her case moving forward. And he poured thousands of dollars into both private investigators and reward money, you name it. He was willing to throw a dollar amount at it. One thing just to note about Jeffrey Smith is that Jeffrey was very, very obese, and he had a lot of health complications because of it. And I only bring that up because it truly did impact his day-to-day life, and he would get fatigued walking from one room to the other. So I bring it up because police did have to concede that he would not have physically been in good enough shape to be able to harm her himself and do anything to dispose of her body. He just physically wouldn't have been capable of doing it. But police did keep their eyes on him. They asked him to take a polygraph and then reported that he refused. Jeffrey said, "No, I didn't refuse. I agreed to take the polygraph if it was administered by the FBI, and then that the FBI would take over the case." So that was kind of the leverage he was trying to use. And the authorities in Philadelphia repeatedly said that they would not bring in the FBI, and that the most they could do to meet him halfway was to have the state police give him the exam. And he declined to take a polygraph on those terms. Now, that might seem a little bit guilty when you hear, why isn't he taking the polygraph? But you also have to remember that this man is a lawyer by education and background, and that's his field of work. And almost anybody who works in that line of work will tell you not to take a polygraph test. Jeffrey did not hold back on his criticism of the police. He felt that their, she never came here angle was self-serving. If they could say that she was never there, then they're kind of off the hook, both for the long investigation and they can squelch all those fears that people were having around the tourism now that, hey, if you come to Philadelphia, you could get abducted and disappear. But at the same time, if she was in Philly and she did make it there, what happened to her? Because we've heard all over that she's somebody who would put up a fight. So the idea that she would get abducted in broad daylight from a tourist location right out there front and center was hard to believe. The questions they would soon get would hardly answer anything. It would only create more questions. On September 7th, 1997, 5 months after Judy's disappearance, a father and son were out deer hunting near the Stony Fork picnic area of North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest. This location is about 9 miles outside of Asheville. As they were walking, they stumbled upon human bones. The bones were scattered along a 300-foot area, likely by animals, but there was also a shallow grave. In the center of the shallow grave was the rest of the skeleton, partially buried and clothed. This Jane Doe was put out to the media as a woman between the ages of 40 to 55 years old, a white woman who had extensive dental work and severe arthritis in her left knee. A doctor working in the area remembered seeing the flyer for Judy, and a gut instinct made him call investigators in Philadelphia. Sure enough, this doctor was spot on. Dental records matched those of Judy Smith. There were cutting marks along her ribs and amongst all the clothing recovered. Authorities determined that Judy was the victim of a homicide and that she had been stabbed to death and buried. Authorities and Judy's family were baffled. How did Judy disappear in Philly and get found outside of Asheville in the rugged mountain area of the Pisgah National Forest? This is over a 9-hour drive and 600 plus miles away. She didn't know anybody in that area. She had no connections to Asheville. At least none that they knew about. And the mysteries don't end there. The bones on Judy's legs still had jeans on them, but she also had on thermal underwear and hiking boots. Nobody, including Jeffrey, recalled seeing her wearing these in Philadelphia. They're clothes you'd wear hiking in the mountains in Asheville in mid-April, which made everyone wonder, okay, she wouldn't be wearing the perfect hiking gear in case somebody abducted her and took her to the mountains. So it leaned more like she willingly went with someone. But who and why? She was getting ready to meet her husband that evening at 6 p.m., so she certainly knew she didn't have enough time to meet up with somebody and go down to North Carolina and be back that night. Notably, her wallet was not found on her, nor her ID or anything else of that matter, and her red backpack was missing. However, near the body was a blue and black vinyl backpack. In that backpack were winter clothes, which had $80 of cash in it. And there was a shirt buried nearby that had $87 in the pockets. The $167 total rang true with what Jeffrey thought was about to be the amount of money she had on her. Her wedding ring was also still on her finger, all of this making robbery seem unlikely. None of the clothes she was last seen wearing have ever been found. One thing that was found nearby was an expensive pair of sunglasses that her family said did not belong to her. So part of what I wonder is, were these men's sunglasses, or maybe did she just buy them that day? But there's no credit card transactions that reflect that, and if they were expensive sunglasses, she should have more cash missing than what she did. None of her credit cards were used after her disappearance, and there was no use of anything else that identified her, like her social security number. Now, after her body was found, people reported sightings of her in the Asheville area, but this would be people in September coming forward and saying, oh yeah, I remember seeing this woman from April, so take these for what you will. One store clerk said the following: "She seemed very alert to me. She was very pleasant. I didn't see anything about her that would indicate that she wasn't right in any way. The woman she talked to said her husband was an attorney from Boston, that she was attending a conference in Philadelphia, and that during that time she had just decided to go to the Asheville area." Now, I have to say, I have a hard time believing this. That's just so specific to remember all these months later. This same cashier did say that she had a red backpack with her, but this was all over the news. She also gave a detail where she said she was shopping for clothing for her daughter and joked that her daughter rarely likes the clothes she picks out for her. And this was something when they ran it by Amy. Amy said, oh yeah, that's kind of a joke that Mom and I have. I don't really tend to care for the clothing choices she makes for me. So I don't know. That's a difficult one to say. That does seem like a specific type of inside joke, but it also doesn't seem impossible to guess. Like, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard to fabricate that, but it is interesting that it rang true. So then an employee at the Biltmore estate recalled seeing Judy. They said she drove up in a gray sedan to this nearby campground that was owned by them and asked if she could sleep for the night in her car. And after being told she couldn't, she drove away. Then a deli owner in the same area said she saw Judy come up to her store in a gray sedan and that she got $30 worth of sandwiches and a toy truck. These are all very suspicious to me personally, but local authorities do consider them to be credible. After this initial investigation, very little has been able to be done to identify not only who killed Judy, but why and how she got to Asheville. This whole story has so many different missing pieces. Authorities in North Carolina ruled out her husband Jeffrey, but Philadelphia police never cleared him. The folks of North Carolina again pointed out his obesity and his trouble breathing, and even the difficulty he had walking room to room, and they just said he would never be able to get his wife's body up to that slope in the Pisgah National Forest. Jeffrey did die in 2005. One of the leading theories is that Judy planned all of this out and she was running away from a life she was no longer happy with and was planning to meet up with somebody, and maybe she was having a long distance romance and whoever she was having that romance with killed her. And so back to the driver's license, they even thought, people who believe this thought that was part of the plan. And I'm not sure about that. If that was part of her getaway, she would not have taken the next flight, but she did. As far as running away, most of her friends and family say she was happy with Jeffrey. One friend, though, did notably speak otherwise and said she had talked to Judy quite a bit and that Judy had a hard time being in a marriage after all of her years of independence, and that she felt kind of smothered by him. She found him to be needy at times, and that she had been on the fence about marrying him. Remember, they were together for 10 years, but they had only been married for 5 months when she went missing. She also had been unhappy that he had made her sign a prenup, and the friend thought it was possible she had tried to meet up with someone new and that she was just no longer happy in her marriage. But her children go back to the point that they had a very outspoken mother, and if she was unhappy with Jeffrey, she would have just told him and left. She wouldn't have staged her own disappearance, which would have required her to not be around her own children anymore. And if you peel back everything and say she was after maybe the money, she wouldn't have had access to her wealthy husband's money if she was a missing person. So anyways, we know ultimately that Judy encountered somebody in April of 1997 who harmed her. So the debate around this is only about the how. Obviously, we know someone harmed her, and we're not speculating that she's still running away. We know something had happened to her, but the question is just how did she encounter this person and how did it contribute to her murder? Another theory is that she's the victim of a serial killer, and a lot of people point to Gary Michael Hilton. He killed several people along hiking trails in national forests and in the southern Appalachian Mountains. But these killings were all around 2007 to 2008. So it's possible, but it was definitely long before he was on anybody's radar. So he would have either killed her in 97 and then had a streak of years where he wasn't committing any crimes, or he continued to do it and get away with it during that time. And that's ultimately where things stand. This is a hard case to believe that we'll find any answers to because it's just been so long, but items and other personal effects were found near her body. It seems that some items were not known to be belonging to her, at least previously. So maybe she bought them that day, but some of these things seem like they could belong to somebody else, maybe even the person who murdered her. So my hope is that continued forensic advancements lend themselves to finding out who did something to Judy. So not only that we know who, but why and how and all of these questions. It's just like a puzzle that needs the pieces put together. And this particular case just has them scattered everywhere. Whereas there's so many other cases where you're just missing a few critical pieces to the puzzle, but this one's like you just dumped the puzzle on the floor. I'm curious because this is such a unique case. I'm curious to what everybody thinks about what happened. Obviously, all we can do is speculate at this point, but I'm wondering what people's opinions are. So feel free to go to the Instagram page at Simpler Time Crime Pod, find the post for this, and comment what your thoughts are. If you have any information on the murder of Judy Smith, please contact the Sheriff's Department at 828-250-6670. This has been a Simpler Time True Crime. It's hard to believe that this was the 20th episode. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and the content I'm putting out about these cases, please go to the Instagram page and follow. Please share it with your friends. And even more importantly, please go to whatever place you listen to podcasts and leave a 5-star review and share that link with your friends as well. Word of mouth is huge for me getting my podcast out there, and I really want more people to be able to hear about these cases. Thank you so much for listening.